Welcome everybody to EGX Digital, the Dorktunes episode. So obviously we are here to discuss music and the music and how it affects the games that we play. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our esteemed guests. I'd like them to introduce themselves and maybe give them a bit of information about themselves and what they've done. So our first guest is Nanita.
Hi, I'm Nanita Desai. I'm a composer of film and television primarily, but also last year I scored a game called Telling Lies. So I started off. It's a little known fact that I started off writing music and doing sound effects for games. I worked on things like Sheep and Pro Pinball and various flight simulators and all sorts of weird, wonderful games for PlayStation 1, actually.
Wow.
And then my career digressed into writing for film and television and linear forms of storytelling as opposed to non-linear. And then last year I scored Telling Lies, so I'll probably be referring to that game a lot, which is a kind of hybrid combination, which is live action, um, but it's totally non-linear. So, and it's out now on PlayStation 4, I believe.
Wow. I didn't know that about you. I didn't realize it was that way around. I thought you'd always done TV and film and did some games as well. I didn't realize you came that way. You learn something every day.
Yeah.
My name's Joe. I'm one half of the flight. I've got my pen. At my age, you have to decide if it's worth picking things up. They're so far down. I'll leave that. I'm one half of the flight. We came from the record industry mainly. I was a touring bass player in the late 90s. Alexis was like a programmer and producer. And we got together producing and songwriting for bands. And then we had got into games, had a nice run of games, Alien Isolation, Horizon Zero Dawn, currently Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which was a big one, and then most recently we're currently working on Gotham Knights, which is very exciting, but we're not allowed to talk about it.
No, obviously we all know about NDAs. So right, as we're here, we're here to discuss about the music and games and how it affects the kind of people that play it. So obviously you compose music for games. Kind of which stance do you come from? Do you come from a stance of I'm writing the music for a particular character, or I'm writing the music for the person who's playing the game or the people that are playing the game?
I personally, mainly because of imposter syndrome, I don't think about the player too much, because that's quite a daunting thing to write about a specific person and not manipulating them, but making them feel something. I try and write for the location and the characters and the story, not thinking about how this is going to affect the people who are playing, more thinking about how is the person feeling the character of the game, or how is the location making the person feel.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Joe. You can't really write for the gamer. You have to, because it is so non-linear. I mean, unlike film and television, where you have total control over and manipulation over how you can tell the audience what to feel and how to feel and when to feel certain emotions. The options are endless with games, so you can't do that to a large extent. But you can. I mean, I do try and take, certainly with linear forms of storytelling, I certainly do try to take the viewer or the gamer on an emotional journey, and you create this arc, for different locations and characters, and so you can actually manipulate people to a certain degree, but you don't want to. So there's give and take in so many different ways.
Yeah, I find that when I get a direction, they're saying, but we're trying to make the viewer feel this. I think I always get a bit jars with me when a director says that. I'm always it's too specific. I feel that it should be about not how the viewer is feeling. It's about how the person in how the character is feeling.
Yeah,
more.
and
I think.
and I think that's where thematic scores come into play, because I mean, with, for example, with Telling Lies, there are four main characters, and I wrote a theme for each character that represented their personality, and each theme was quite long. We're writing sort of a 5.5 minute long duration theme.
Yeah.
And each personality had two different aspects to their personality: the exterior personality that they project to the world. So you had a lovely piece of music that accompanied that, but then the way that the music can actually influence the gameplay and the experience, the immersive experience for the gamer, is that when you are digging deep into the character's psyche and personality, the music would actually reveal there'd be a hidden loop that would then come into play, and the music would subtly shift tone, and that would help indicate to the gamer that, oh, I'm onto something here. And so that's when you can subtly guide the gamer subconsciously without them realizing it. So character themes like that can be really useful in that regard.
I often don't. Oh, I say that. I now thinking about it, I do conceptualize, but I often don't try to overly conceptualize what we're. So you're talking about. How do you think about what the player is feeling? How do you think about it? I try not to over conceptualize too much. And now thinking about it, there are games like Odyssey where we did conceptualize a lot. But I'm.
How did you do that?
We went to museums, went to bookshops, actually we would sit in museums and just sit with the instruments, because a lot of them you can't really touch and play. A lot of it is based on, I key off visuals a lot. So we'd go and sit in bookshops and look through old paintings or old imagery from museums, or we I went to the British Museum and looked at all their stolen antiquities and sat with that a lot, try not to feel too sick.
It must have been difficult for you to be able to sit there and see these instruments that you can't play, and you're just like.
I've always been a bit funny in museums anyway with ancient artifacts, but it's just being around things gives you an emotional feeling, and that was really useful, just being around stuff. And I, in the good old days, I used to go to bookshops, and I'll sit for a day and just thumb through books and look at pictures and imagery and stuff. And that's.
So you didn't spend 6 months in Greece then?
No. The developers had some lovely trips. Oh,
get the developer to pay for it.
Yeah, no, that would have been amazing. But the developers didn't. They sent us videos of them just walking around the areas, so we could kind of see and hear where they were, like in the Peloponnese or in Athenia, or there's loads of, and they would send us just linear recordings of this. This was Lydia would walk through a field and just record herself walking through a field, and we'd get that stuff.
Yeah.
She'd send us a lot on games. We get a lot of background material, tons of the stuff, which I love. Mainly the design, the imagery. I love.
It must have been difficult for you, considering like how big both Isolation and Odyssey were, and kind of the pressure almost to perform in a way.
Alien was, I think, 17 hours of gameplay. I think. Okay. Odyssey was 100.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So crazy amount of
and that's not
so on and that's not the DLC. On Isolation, it's on a space station, which is basically a very similar environment the whole time. So we broke it up into the medical bay and the different areas. So we knew when you go to the medical bay, the music's going to sound like this. And we also did a timeline from the beginning game to the end. So we'd start off in the 1970s world of Alien, and then throughout the game we'd go from the 70s through the 80s into modern day. So the middle of the game where you get with all the robots, that's in the 1980s, and then the end of the game is modern samples and modern instruments, the guitars and stuff. And then Odyssey, we had the map, the Peloponnese, the Athenia, the arid islands, the the forest, like, you know, all the different areas, and we broke the map up. But we also, like you would say, we also, Anita, we also did protagonist themes and antagonist themes. We did the protagonist and her and his family, and then the antagonists, and then we broke it down to the factions and the Athenians and it was so much work.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that concept wall, just like.
Oh. I this is another thing. I look at the game as I'm very visual. So in my head, I have a sphere. The game is a ball. Alexis hit the game as a list.
Okay.
And that's how we work together really well. I come at it. I kind of look at it as the whole thing.
Yeah, you're like me.
Yeah,
I
so
can see the bigger picture.
And I like that. I like thinking about, we're doing this at the end of the game. I get excited thinking, we're going to do that soon. But Alexis rigidly goes down a list, and has the schedule on it, which I'm not thinking about either. But he can't think like more than 3 things ahead, and it's really useful. So as an amorphous blob, the two of us together, are like the perfect being. So he's very kind of.
You're almost at certain points you're running off and you're like, I want to do this and I want to do that, and he's like,
no, he won't let me. But I'm thinking about other things while I'm conceptualizing other stuff, and he's going down his list. It's really useful.
Yeah, drilling down. Whereas I have to do both because I work on my own.
Yeah.
Getting a grasp of the overall picture, the world, as you say, the globe.
Yeah.
But then having to be very meticulous and very ordered and work through cue by cue. So in terms of going back to concept, I mean, that I do like on Taking Lies, I mean, my budget would help me with conceptualizing the whole score, but also I'm very visually inspired like you, and always have been. But on this project, that was the challenge for me, was to not have any visuals at all, because while I was presented with a 270-page script to work from, and so that's why we went down the route of coming up with character themes and working on the score that way. But I had no images, and I didn't even have the cast.
Oh wow!
So what was happening was that he was still writing the script while I was writing the music. So we'd exchange Spotify playlists of coming up with. I'd get very detailed notes and in-depth conversations with Sam, the director and developer of the game, who would then say, well, this is this character and this is what he likes to eat for breakfast, and when he was a child this was his favorite movie, and he'd write backstories of these characters' lives that formed these 3-dimensional human beings in my mind's eye that really helped me dive into the game and try and get a grasp of their person, the human being, and then be able to be authentic to their personality. That was a really interesting route into approaching the score, and Sam and both of us were very inspired because it's a political thriller full of intrigue, and it pays homage to a lot of, though it's set in modern day times, it's very inspired by movies from the 60s and 70s, like I can't remember now, but The Conversation, Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation, and all these political movies,
noir thrillers,
and so we thought we'd go down a neo-classical noir classical musical route, and also the characters are you're watching intimate conversations between these characters, and you're privy to these private conversations, but you shouldn't be. So there's a very sort of mysterious sort of ambiance to the whole thing, and when you're watching someone talking, but you're not hearing the other side of the conversation, and so there's a lot of silence as well, and so the music can really help create this atmosphere. And when you're picking up on someone responding to someone talking, and you're seeing their facial nuances and every little sort of eye wink or sort of
Yeah.
eyebrow raising or scowl or something, and think, what on earth is the other person saying? But looking at the music from a holistic point of view, the music had to sweep over the personality of the character. It sort of have this overall sort of vibe to it. And I would write loads of themes, to try and encapsulate a character called David, for example. And I think, who is David? And while I was writing the music would help inform Sam while he was writing the script.
Yeah.
So we were both riffing off each other, where I'd write a piece, send it to him. He'd be like a traditional film score writer, screenplay writer. He'd be writing the script while listening to my music on his headphones.
Excellent.
As well, which was a really nice sort of exchange of creativity
Yeah.
you don't normally get to do.
No.
So by the time, when the 4 actors were cast, and it was announced on Variety or something like that, this is the lead cast, I thought, yes, because I thought, I've got you can look at someone's face and go, that piece of music is going to work for that person,
Yeah.
that actor.
Yeah.
That was a really, really cool moment for me.
Technically, did you? I imagine that you had quite a tight palette. Do you always do a palette? But when you start, do you start with a palette, making a palette, or how do you do it?
No, it varies from project to project. I mean, on this one, I knew that I would have 15 strings, a couple of woodwind, a piano, and a harp, and that's all I restrained myself from using anything else. And there were lots of sort of conceptual ideas why we wanted a pure acoustic score. But, like you probably, I love bringing in musicians very early on in a project as well. So I'll bring in musicians to my studio, and we'll have semi-improvised recording sessions. I'll write basic sketches, and then I'll bring musicians in, and they will help inform me, or, so we'll branch off into different directions, and it's a very organic process that evolves, over the months.
I was almost going to ask that, when you do something like that, how far do you think the music changes from what you had in your mind to what it becomes with the interjection of those other people?
I think it's very easy to lose if you don't create parameters for yourself. It's very easy to digress and lose yourself. And sometimes, I mean, I'm doing some music I'm doing a score at the moment, and it's very electronica and craft worky, and I'm getting out the synths, and it's fantastic. And we digressed a bit over the weeks into exploring other sounds, like bringing in real strings and things. And the director came over to my studio, and he said, you know what, let's go back to what our original concept was, our ideas, and let's stick to that. So it's because you don't want to lose sight of that initial seed of concept that you have in the brief for your ideas. And I think it's just sticking to your guns and being strict about it for me anyway.
It's funny because I always remember speaking with John Hillman, and he scored that Dragon Cancer, and he said that he had conceptualized a score and around it, and because he was good friends with the family at the time, and he just said that one night, his wife and his kids went to bed, and he sat down in front of the piano, and the score literally just came out. And he said what had written before just wasn't what was needed. It was the thing that came out now, and it was just so beautifully raw. And I think personally, the score for me is one of my favorite in the world because it's so personal. Like there's a piece on it called "Awake, Oh Awake, My Joel," and that's probably one of the most beautiful, sad pieces of music, but yet full of love, full of hope, full of absolute terror, but the piece actually allows the listener to listen to every single note. There's a breath in between those notes, and it's something really special.
When we do games, I try not to. Sometimes we have to. Like on Odyssey, we had to do. We would never do physical palettes. There's technically kind of in logic. We'll never sit down and go, there's our strings, there's our brass, there's our synths, we never sit and I know some composers who like to start a project and sit and find all their sounds and have this, sometimes you go to, they've got this huge, on a huge screen, because they're composers and they need huge screens. They have these huge screens, and there's my orchestra, and here's my things, and we like to keep things small if we can. We'll have a reverb and a delay and a like a mastering effects bus, and that's it. We usually have the same stereo delay and a reverb, and then
it's what you used to,
basically. But then we like to,
I love stereo delays.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then over the process of writing on the project, our palette will grow as we go along, and we'll find that we're going back to sounds more often, or we realize that sound is for this character. We'll start using it, but we don't sit down usually and say, right, this is these people, this is this and this. But on Odyssey, we had to do it for the map, we had to do it for the protagonist, the antagonist. So we would, and that would be really useful when we were doing the project, say, especially when we've got the cut scenes. Where is this? Who's in the scene? Where are we on the timeline? Okay, this is what the palette is here. So if we're in the Peloponnese, that's where these people are warriors, and it's just the breadbasket of Greece, and it really helped us always keep us fresh. If we're working on one area for a long time, to go, okay, finally we were in the arid islands, let's do this completely different, and we don't have to use any of those instruments. And that was that. So we have, I try not to, if I can, I like going through menus, and part of my writing creative process is pulling things up and trying things. And if it's all there already in the beginning, I don't find it very exciting at all. It doesn't inspire me.
It's about inspiration, isn't it, Joe? Where does your inspiration come from? And I think it's you want to be surprised yourself through the entirety of the project. How do you keep that freshness going? And I'm the same. I'm not one of those composers that has a 1,000 tracks in their template, of the whole orchestra. I like to spend 2 or 3 days if I can. That's a luxury, even then, but spend some time creating a new, just listening to sounds will inspire me, and I'll think, I can write a piece just from that one sound. And then I'll start off with one sound that inspires me, write something, and by the end of the piece I will have strayed away from that sound, and I love that sort of shooting off into different directions. Or even, as you say, bringing in musicians, and I'll do an experimental recording session with something, and I'll say to them, why don't you try this, try that? And I'll start singing melody lines to musicians, and they go, you're mad, and then I wrote this score last year, and a lot of it was improvisatory. Is that the right word? And I had this cellist come in, and we did this writing session where I said, you can only use 7 notes. Okay, these are the 7 notes, and we're going to change the notes. When I point my finger upwards, you're going to go up. We were recording, go up a tone. If I go down, point downwards, go down a tone. If I do that again, go down another tone. And we recorded a line, and then we recorded another line on top of it, and we did the same thing, and we just sort of layered it, and we had about 6 or 7 takes of this amazing piece written on the cello, but with like 6 or 7 cellos all doing different things, and it was a very, very random,
organic
process that was really special.
Well,
and you can't sit down and if you sat down and write it, it just wouldn't work.
No, the fights on Odyssey were basically jams, where we'd go, Mike, this is the instrument, this is we're doing the bandit fights, this is the instrument, this is the kind of people they are, here's a tempo, go. And we would just sit. I did most of it on an acoustic bass, and we would just jam. And it was absolutely terrifying. Mike was like, because he hadn't worked with us this intensely before, and in the first couple of weeks he was knackered, because we go fight, yes, like that, no, not like that, like this, and we just jam, and it was like fighting. And he looked like he'd be beaten up at the end of it. But if you listen to the fight, they're brilliant, and they are basically just a free-form linear jam. With all we specified is if it's the Peloponnese, it's this scale and these kind of rhythms. If it's Athenia, it's much more they're mathematicians, and it's much more ordered, and these are the scales we're using here. And it was great, but it was crazy.
But then after recording those jams, are you then going in afterwards and doing a lot of post-processing and editing and sound editing and afterwards? Yeah.
Yes, we would. Alexis is Mr. Chops, and he would go in and physically chop stuff and get it in time. And we don't mind if the notes are fluffed or played badly, as long as it's in time and it sounds tight. It sounds like you're doing it with purpose, then it doesn't matter. Yeah. So we would not chopping every note, but chopping sections and moving them and just getting everything tighter.
But also, I think for that particular game, they wouldn't be in those times and be going, let's get this absolute perfect right. They're really into kind of the energy and absolutely.
But if things are getting really loose, you lose the energy and it sounds like you're playing badly. Whereas I can play badly and he can make it sound really good because I'm so tight.
So I have a question for you both, actually. When you put a project to bed and you've finished writing all the music, I
hate it. I used to think I'm rubbish. Why? I'm going to go work in a museum. I'm going to go work in a hotel.
No, the question is kind of similar to that. It's like, are you 100% happy with what you've done? Or do you ever want to go back and you listen to it back and you think, and it's released, and you think, oh God, I wish I'd done that differently?
Always for me.
Yeah.
I think time. I mean, I'm a stickler for detail, so I will try and perfect as much as I can. But the clock is never on my side, and I always have a deadline. So I think the art of being a composer is being able to produce the best quality you can in an ever decreasing amount of time, and fooling people into thinking you've been working on it for months.
I usually can't hear it at all. Literally, I can't hear what's good or bad, or it just sounds like noise by the end of it. Especially, if Assassin's Creed was 100 hours, the amount of music we had to write of it was insane. But we're not Sorry.
How much of that music did you bin?
None of it.
Wow.
You haven't got time. So we had to get it right. We got, so everything we did is on the game. I think there was one cue that was thrown out. So by the end of it, I can't hear it anymore. But then I'm not too precious about the OST and what goes on it and mixes and stuff like that. But when I go back, hang on a sec, guys. When I go back, I'm always pretty pleased with it. If I give it a couple of years and listen to it later, I'm always pretty pleased with it. But at the time, I can't.
Yeah. Do you find it difficult, kind of, say, months or a year later? You're like, okay, that's gone now. That was my baby, and it's gone. It's its own thing.
Has Anita frozen for you? Because she's frozen for me.
Anita? Oh, I can't see it.
Do you want to pause and get it back?
1 second, if I get this bloody thing.
Sorry, mate.
No, it's fine. 1 second. It's just not working for me. Apologies, folks. We had some technical issues there, so we're back.
We were being hacked. It was very exciting. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
So.
We had some unwelcome intruders in our Zoom meeting.
How amazing!
The times that it happens, eh?
I have no idea what we were talking about.
We're talking about when the games, when you finish
working on project.
That's right. So yes, when I revisit it, I'm very happy with it, but it has to be like 2 years later.
Yeah.
And then I forget about all the kind of I'm always talking about my imposter syndrome, is everyone knows the tricks that I was using to make that music. And once I've forgotten the process, actually it's quite good. But when I remember the trick, well, not the tricks, but the process that went into it, I kind of I like it less. So 2 years later, I always go back and actually it's great.
It's strange because I know so many composers, I've certainly spoken to a few, that don't actually like listen to anything that they've done after they've done it and it's released. They're just like, right, that's gone now.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They're just saying that. They love it. They sit there with a glass of wine going, I am a genius.
I tend to not listen to my stuff unless I have to, unless I go back on it. But I mean, there's always, I was listening to stuff that I did. Someone asked me for something recently, can you send us the first piece of music you ever wrote?
Oh my gosh.
And I've not listened to my early stuff in years. And I actually listened to the first 6 or 7 pieces of music I ever wrote as a professional composer. And I thought, how did I do that? How did I get away with, how did I make a living as a composer? And it was like, talking about restricting palettes of sounds. I had such little gear and I produced stuff that actually I'm quite proud of. I had to be honest. I listened to that.
It's like a conversation I had with David Houston when he did Thomas Was Alone. He basically did it on like a bon tempi with another little thing, and that was it. And he said that was my kind of, and the computer. He said that's all I had, and that soundtrack is one of them. It's beautiful.
Well, the band I used to tour with, they did it all on archives with MPCs. And when they got late, the technology improved, and I was in the band. They had to constrain themselves back to what they had because it always sounded better before.
Yeah.
So it's good to constrain yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I have a room full of kit, and most of it, I have, all sorts of pedals and guitars and synths, and I just, do I use it? I do, but I, as you say, I like to create. It's like, as I said, this project I'm doing at the moment, another project, it's all craftworky and synthwave and electronica, and I'm loving it because I'm getting to use toys that I don't normally get asked to use. So
I buy a new toy for every project.
Yeah, I'll buy an instrument or a toy for that project. I think it's because just
for the project.
No, but you do. So on Odyssey, we went to, there's a shop called Hobgoblin in Soho. And we went down there and we said, right, we're doing this project. It's set in ancient Greece. What have you got? And they can play all the instruments. They go, right, have one of these. They have a pan pipe, and they would show us. And then this, and we bought loads of instruments for that. Tons of stuff.
In a strange way, it's similar to what I used to do. I used to work in HMV many, many years ago. And my favorite thing was somebody coming in and saying, look, I've got this album and I really love it. What have you got that's like that? I'd be like, right, grab your hand, take them out and be like, this. Yeah,
that I missed. We're lucky we've got a rough trade near us. So we're literally opposite our studio. So we go in there every day and say, what have you got? What have you got? But I missed the classical and the jazz departments of HMV and Oxford Street were brilliant. They were. You could go in and say, I want the best recording of this, and they go, all right, you want this from 1977, and they get out the CD for you. It was a matter, and I really missed that. You don't have that on iTunes.
Yeah.
But I'm finding it on. Sorry, while I waffle on, I'm finding it on Twitter. I'm finding there are people I follow on Twitter who are always talking, and they're very welcoming. If you ask, what have you got at the moment, what you're listening, there are some great people on Twitter who's sharing their knowledge.
Twitter is a good font of knowledge, isn't it? And musicians as well. I just love like I set up this remote recording directory of musicians.
Oh yes,
great.
During lockdown, and I just thought, a lot of people are unemployed. Musicians are suddenly out of work. And I needed musicians. I know I'll create a little database of musicians that are outside of my network and outside of my circle. And suddenly, literally within 4 days, I'd been inundated with like 350 people. And now we've got over 700 musicians on the database. That's
amazing.
Composers to use. And they're from all over the world. And I've been using a handful of them, for various projects the last few months. and it's great. It's just a font of wisdom and musicianship and musicians. You know, it's just lovely to be able to. I think that's what I miss most is about, you know, working on my own, is that collaborating with other musicians is so important.
Yeah, I'm so lucky with having. We're going to be back in the studio in about a week and a half,
Yeah.
and to you know, we've been working for a few months separately, and it's so different. Even just having, so we have 2 rooms, and just having Alexis in the other room, like, Alexis, come and have a listen to this, and just those little things, or just pressing play with somebody else in the room without even asking them, you feel, that's wrong. Just you know, just getting somebody into the room to have a listen to this without them saying anything, you can feel, oh, this is a bit boring, or this is the wrong, I've gone down the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, I use my husband for that. He's a great musician. Was a guitarist, and he plays the double bass. So he's like my exec producer, and I'll be, you know, rambling on a piece of music and getting lost into it and thinking, is this good or is this bad? After 5 hours of working on it, and then I'll bring him in and I'll play it to him, and within seconds I'll know that's crap. You know. Yeah.
My wife's a much better musician than me, and I call her in. NDAs allowing, of course. I get her in and say, what do you think of this? I told her at the beginning of lockdown, you're going to have to be Alexis, because I need somebody I can play stuff to. So yes, it's always having people around is so useful.
So what I'm going to say now is, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the episode.
Not again. You've
the end of the panel. Why don't we just do it again?
Yeah, exactly.
So I would just like to say a massive thank you to you both.
And
technical issues aside, there have been a few, but it's been really good fun. So
thanks, mate. Sorry if we went off on tangents, but
no. I think it's really important that we do that, because I don't, as I've always said to people on the show, it's a very organic thing. The conversation really needs to flow. I'm not going to sit there and I've got 17 things that we need to discuss. You know, as long as it's an interesting conversation, that's fine by me. So
can I say one thing? I don't know if Anita agrees. She may hate me for saying this, but we're on Twitter. So if anybody wants to have a chat, I don't know if my direct messages are open, but do just drop us a line on Twitter, and I'll be happy to chat with you.
So you are the Flight Music.
Yeah.
And Nanita, you are Nanita's Desai. And I'm either Evil Noob or Dork Tunes. So hit us any of us up. We always love a chat, you know. And as soon as this is all over,